morning. And here with us now in New York, Democratic Senator from Connecticut, Senator Richard Blumenthal. Mike Barnacle and John Heilman are also back at the table. Senator, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
I know you've been in Newtown all weekend long, and you've called this moment transformative in terms of several debates that we're having. Why don't we start with the most difficult one, because I want to not only hear about this being a transformative moment, but what do you think is truly possible to come out of this?
I think it is formative. I think it will spur and change the debate and the national discussion, beginning with the President's statement last night, what Joe just said so powerfully and eloquently, what my colleague Joe Manchin said earlier on this show, I think are really very, very powerful signs that we've entered a different era in this discussion. And I come to this issue with some history in law enforcement, and I'm hearing from my colleagues, former colleagues in law enforcement, we need to do something.
You come to this with history in Connecticut, decades, with a family in Connecticut, 4 children, and as you mentioned, a career in law enforcement, serving as the Attorney General to the state. I know Connecticut so well. I covered you over the years as Attorney General when I was a reporter there. If you could first talk about the personal part of this and the town of Newtown itself, which is so beautiful and so strong, but so broken right now, and then we'll get back to politics.
I think Newtown will heal. It is a strong and vibrant town bound together by countless relationships that are deeply rooted. And I've been at the vigils and the church services, at the firehouses, and people there are resilient and resolute. It's the quintessential small New England town, and exquisitely beautiful, as you have said. And I think that what I'm hearing from folks there is, again, you need to do something. The assault weapons ban, the ban on high-capacity magazines, mental health efforts. We need to do something. That is what I hear from so many people in Newtown as well as elsewhere across the country.
So what do you think legislatively is truly possible and will have an impact that we can see in the near future? Because there's a lot of course, ideological arguments about gun control and guns, and then you look at the reality and you get into the debate, and it can go on forever with nothing.
I advocated an assault weapon ban for Connecticut back in the 1990s when the federal ban was adopted, and then I defended it in court when it was challenged on constitutional grounds. I think an assault weapon ban can be revived at the federal level. I think that is practical and feasible, especially with the kind of change in debate that I would anticipate. High-capacity magazines that were so key to the slaughter, the massacre that occurred in Newtown. And of course, mental health efforts are within our grasp if we're willing to commit the resources, and better enforcement. You can have the best laws on the books, as you well know, Mika, right, but they need to be enforced, and we need to devote the resources to enforcing them. And people would have been killed in far greater numbers at that school but for the heroic response of the first responders.
Mike Barnacle, the President of the United States last night, did what only a president can do, telling the people of Newtown, first of all, they were not alone in their grief, and also talking about how these tragedies must end. It was a moment that we see once every so often. George W. Bush after 9/11 on the pile of rubble, Bill Clinton after Oklahoma City, Ronald Reagan after the Challenger accident, where the president becomes comforter-in-chief. Talking about the president, what he did last night, and how he did it.
Well, it was an epic moment in the life of the country. It was an epic moment in his presidency and in his life as a parent and as a president, clearly. I agree with Senator Blumenthal in that this moment is not going to be diminished by time. It's going to go away.
No, it's not.
And partially because, as we spoke earlier, the 3 numbers that are critical in this, 20, 6, and 7. 20 victims, and their ages are 6 and 7 years of age in this holiday season of ours. And the other reason it's not going to go away is the touch of a hand. Every parent out there, you don't hold your child's hand the first day in high school or the junior prom or going off to college, but you have a clear memory of holding a child's hand at 6 and 7, of walking them to the bus stop.
You've done it 7 times. I've done it 4 times. The senator's done it 4 times. And as a parent,
these are our children.
These are our children that we failed. We failed them.
Yeah,
and we can't fail them again.
You know, Senator, the last time I looked, when the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were written, there was no internet. Online gun sales account for a horrendous number of guns out there in this country. Is that a start? Is that possible, to get control of that?
Getting control of the sales, the proliferation of these kinds of weapons, the AR-15 that was used in this kind of attack, designed for combat. And an adaptation of a combat arm that sold on the internet can be deadly. But your point is exactly right. I think this moment, which we have an obligation to seize, is the result of the ages of these young people and the powerfully distinctive memory that every one of us has as a parent of saying goodbye in the morning. Those kids were going to be making gingerbreads and learning their ABC. And I saw their parents at the firehouse. And the anguish, the cries of pain is something that will never leave my memory.
Part of it has to be rooted in something the president said last night. He said they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, with all due respect, they were in the right place at the right time. They were in first grade.
They were in first grade, which is where they were supposed to be, and they were killed by someone who never should have been there, never should have had access to that school with that weapon. But the point is, you know, the state police said to me, if they were confronting somebody armed in that way with multiple magazines filled with 30 rounds each, enough to kill probably everyone in the school and then some, they would not have been able to stop him. They would have been killed because he was so heavily armed and armored. So I think the call to action here has to be to do something consistent with the Second Amendment. We're not taking rights away from anyone. Someone who wants to be a hunter has every right to do it. Someone who wants to go through the oversight system that exists for buying weapons, doing it face-to-face, properly documented. No rights will be taken away from anyone. And the Second Amendment, I'm a constitutional advocate like you are. First Amendment, very clear rights, but we need codes and conduct and oversight and enforcement that matches the gravity and the exigency of
First Amendment, John Heilman, is not absolute any more than the Second Amendment is absolute.
Or any other amendment.
Or any other amendment is absolute.
And I'll say, you know, the thing that Mike talked about, the president obviously connecting in a very human way last night. The president's been comforted before. We've had shootings that have happened during his administration. I think four of them where he's had to go and do this. He always gives a great speech. What was different last night, in addition to the weight of it because it was children, was there was a toughness to the things the president said about action. He said, I'm going to use whatever powers my office has to make this an urgent priority. So I want to ask a political question of the senator. You know, you've had things have changed a lot in the last 20 years when in the amount of time since the NRA really flexed its muscles in the 1994 congressional elections and cost a lot of conservative Democrats their seats when they voted for the assault weapons ban back then. Things have changed. But even up in Connecticut, a very Democratic state, in this town, very, very mild restrictions on shooting were defeated, tabled, just earlier this year. So there's still, this is hard still, right? Talk about in the United States Congress as a political analyst, how much have things changed? That conservative Democrats in rural districts and some Republicans can be moved to do something more dramatic than what was defeated in Newtown earlier this year in your very blue state.
A key question. And in Newtown, there are firing ranges used by the Lances, Nancy and her son, and gun stores. in the vicinity, a number of them. But I think the point here is that there's a real opportunity for common ground, a real opportunity to see this moment and try to build bridges, just as we are trying to do across the aisle in parties, Republican, Democrat. Both sides here have a common stake in sustaining the First and Second Amendments. And they're not absolute, but they will be endangered if the pendulum swings as a result of overreaction. And there's an opportunity now to seize this moment and do something common sense, sensible, reasonable. A 30-round magazine for a combat-style weapon, call it an assault, call it AR-14, a Bushmaster 223, bearing those kinds of bullets, which, when they entered those children, ripped them apart, and up to 11 of them in some of the victims. That kind of massacre has no place in our society, and it comes after, as the President said so eloquently last night, a spate of these kinds of shootings. So I think that there may be opposition, but whether it's the NRA, and we don't need to talk about specific organizations, but one of them is based in Newtown itself, the organization that I worked closely with in trying to establish some common ground back in the 1990s and the early part of this century. So I think there is an opportunity.
There is an opportunity, and you see Joe Manchin, a guy who's been A-rated by the NRA for years.
And yourself, as you pointed out.
I was A-rated by the NRA for 4 terms. They didn't have a better friend on Capitol Hill than me. And a lot of other people, I think Democrats and Republicans, look at this and say, enough is enough. From an Oregon mall to a Colorado movie theater to a college campus in Virginia to a first-grade school in Connecticut. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to pick up the trail here. And guess what? This trail is leading to your front door. This trail is leading to your community. This trail is leading to your children. We've got to do something about it, Senator.
And there are people who are in the right place, exactly where they are supposed to be, who become victims, whether it's going to a movie or attending classes or worshiping.
Yeah. Worshiping, exactly.
But it has to be, I think, a combination of measures. No single law will do it. There's no panacea here.
You're right. It's not just a gun issue. It is a cultural issue. It is a mental health issue.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for coming here and saying that. And thank you for, along with the President and so many others, the Governor, bringing comfort in any way you can to the people of Newtown and Sandy Hook. And God bless you.
Senator Blumenthal, thank you very much.